So I wanted to talk a little today about some comments Martin Scorsese made a while ago about Marvel movies. It wasn't necessarily about Marvel movies specifically, but was aimed at that kind of movie world. The comments were made quite a while ago, I'm sure we're all aware of them by now. I wasn't originally going to make a video on it, but there's been so much discussion about what he said, I thought I'd chime in as well. The Irishman director was promoting his new film, a gangster picture starring Robert De Niro and Al Pacino that could not get funding from Hollywood and instead was made with the streaming giant Netflix and therefore did not get a wide release in cinemas. And he made the following comments about Marvel movies. "I don't see them. I tried, but that's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them, as well made as they are, with actors doing the best they can under the circumstances, is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." In a different interview, he added, "It's not cinema, it's something else. We shouldn't be invaded by it. We need cinemas to step up and show films that are narrative films." He also said, "Theatres have become amusement parks. That is all fine and good, but don't invade everything else in that sense. That is fine and good for those who enjoy that type of film, and by the way, knowing what goes into them now, I admire what they do. It's not my kind of thing, it simply is not. It's creating another kind of audience that thinks cinema is that." These comments sparked a lot of backlash, and Scorsese clarified and contextualized his comments later on when he said, "Let's say a family wants to go to an amusement park. That's a good thing, And at theme parks, there's these cinematic expressions. They're a new art form. It's something different from films that are shown normally in theatres, that's all. My concern is losing the screens to massive theme park films, which I say again, they're their own new art form. Cinema now is changing. We have so many venues, there are so many ways to make films, so enjoyable. Fine, go and it's an event and it's great to go to an event like an amusement park. But don't crowd out Greta Gerwig and don't crowd out Paul Thomas Anderson and Noah Baumbach and those people in terms of theatre." Scorsese's comments were backed up by legendary film director Francis Ford Coppola, who said, "Martin Scorsese says that the Marvel picture is not cinema. He's right, because we expect to learn something from cinema. We expect to gain some enlightenment, some knowledge, some inspiration. Arguably, I don't know that anyone gets anything out of seeing the same movie over and over again, which is the Marvel movies. A thing that has no risk to it. I've said before, making a film without risk is like making a baby without sex. Part of it is risk, and that's what makes it so interesting. That's why we learn so much when it's made. Also, there is a philosophy that a person of riches can be just or unjust. It's very important when you talk about it. To gain riches unjustly just uses up, it doesn't contribute. Wealth is only what is just, what brings more to the society. Cinema is the same way. Real cinema brings something, a wonderful gift to society. It doesn't just take money and make people rich. That's despicable. So Martin was kind when he said it's not cinema. He didn't say it's despicable, which I just said it is. A few other filmmakers share the same sentiment, such as Ken Loach, who said Marvel movies are a market exercise, and Benedict Cumberbatch, who wholeheartedly agreed with the message Scorsese was saying. And Scorsese isn't the first to criticize these kind of films. James Cameron and Mel Gibson, for example, have gone on record criticizing superhero films. However, a huge number of directors and actors, pretty much all associated with Marvel cinema in one way or another, such as Samuel L. Jackson, Robert Downey Jr., James Gunn, and Disney CEO Bob Iger have come out and respectfully criticized Scorsese's comments. Now, every film fan is going to have an opinion on Scorsese's comments one way or another. A lot of people have been talking about it. There are many people who have said he is completely correct and films like superhero movies are ruining cinema, and then there are those on the other side of the fence who think he and Coppola are two old has-beens who are out of touch with the modern-day movie world. I can understand if some Marvel movie fans feel offended, but you shouldn't, because all he's doing is expressing his opinion. But to call him out of touch is just plain wrong, seeing as though compared to his contemporaries, Scorsese is actually pretty in the now when it comes to movies. He's made a 3D movie, he's done work on TV, he's done digital filmmaking, and his last film is not only one of his best reviewed films, but he also made it with Netflix, the streaming platform. So he's definitely not out of touch. And if you do find yourself offended, you should feel a bit more secure about the kind of films you enjoy and not freak out that Scorsese has different tastes to you. Now, when it comes to the comments, where Scorsese says they're not cinema, I don't think any one individual has a right over what qualifies as cinema and what doesn't. The fact of the matter is, Marvel movies are cinema. But I can see what he means, and in general I am in agreement with his comments. In fact, he's more or less saying what so many film fans are saying these days, in that cinema today is dominated by these kind of films and there's just no space for any other kind of movie. And he's right. This isn't an old man going on about how things were better back in his day. He is factually right in some respect, because you do have things like Disney who almost have a monopoly on the cinema landscape, saying that going forward only their tentpole movies will be shown in cinemas and everything else is going to a streaming platform. And then you have other situations where Disney have said to theatre owners that they have to show their new Star Wars film in their screens for a certain amount of weeks, otherwise they would not be given permission to show it. And there was one case, for example, of an independent theatre that only had one screen, and the owner was forced to make a decision to show the Star Wars film on a loop repeatedly or not show it at all. So while some might feel Scorsese's comments about being invaded might be over the top, they're really not. I have to say, I am in the boat of people who pretty much lament the way mainstream cinema is going. Mid-budget movies where risks are taken and there is a focus on telling a good story are not the norm anymore, but they were when Scorsese was up and coming through the 60s and 70s. You have a few studios here and there like A22 trying to make those kind of films, but we all know it's just not happening on a mass scale. If you want quality, if you want authors, you go to TV. You go to the streaming companies, or you accept a minuscule budget. Scorsese's criticism is completely valid. I enjoy most of the Marvel movies I've seen. They're not particularly my kind of films. I won't go out of my way to watch them, but they have an audience, and that's nice. But I don't like what Marvel movies represent. The fact that they are very shallow films designed by a committee to appeal to a mass audience. They lack soul, they lack artistic vision, and the bottom line is that they are a formula that Hollywood has found that will guarantee them money, and they will keep riding that train until, like the Western, it runs out of steam and something else takes over. But when it comes to a point that that's almost all you're able to see in a cinema, that other kinds of movies are getting pushed out and there's no variety, there's no alternative to the next formulatic superhero movie, or remake, or all-female reboot, then you have a problem. In a perfect world, there is a supply of both kinds of films. And to be honest, Scorsese wasn't exactly slamming Marvel cinema. He called them theme park movies, and what's wrong with that? They are theme park movies. You go in with your friends and family, a bag of popcorn in one hand, you want to see effects and explosions and people flying around, and then you go home. In some cinemas, they even blow air and spray water in your face and shake the seats. These kind of films do not possess genuine human emotion. They have nothing to say. They lack cinematic depth. They don't make you think and reflect, and they're not looking to either. They do the job they're intended to do, which is to entertain and thrill, much like a theme park ride. The Scorsese quotes have been blown out of proportion really and sensationalized by a click-chasing media. He's actually put into words something many people are feeling and has the backup of being one of the most successful directors of all time with a 50-plus year career. The comments, which have received all sorts of fire online, as is the norm these days I guess, are actually quite nuanced and thoughtful. And plus, is there anyone who doesn't think that the vast majority of superhero films are the same movie, just with a different superhero slapped on the front? I don't think Scorsese would have a problem if these films actually took risks and tried something different, something most of them don't do. He was, after all, attached to produce the Joker movie at one point. Scorsese and Coppola are lamenting the change in the cinema landscape, and the way these kind of films have taken over the industry. I mean, it does say something when directors as powerful as Steven Spielberg struggle to get some pictures made. And the best example is probably Scorsese's very own Irishman film. This movie stars Al Pacino, it stars Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro. It's a dream movie, and if it wasn't for Netflix, it would have never gotten made, not with a Hollywood studio. Could a film like Taxi Driver be made today? Maybe. Or would a young Scorsese, fresh off of Mean Streets, be picked up to be the yes man director for the next Avengers movie, scripted and storyboarded before he is even hired? Of course, you do have films with artistic vision being made. Joker, for example, could be called this generation's Taxi Driver, but they are far and few between and most definitely not the norm, which it was during the 70s, the prime of Scorsese and Coppola. The next Scorsese, the next Friedkin, Altman or Cimino might be out there with a masterpiece of a script that no one wants to make. And when you look at it this way, you could say that yes, Scorsese was actually being kind, and much worse could be said about the current state of cinema. And in fact, it's because things are so bad that we're seeing companies like Netflix flourish with critical hits. Don't forget, Scorsese even criticized Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, who he is friends with, for the kind of blockbusters they made in the 1980s and how those films changed the landscape of cinema. If he thinks a superbly crafted adventure film like Raiders of the Lost Ark is not art, imagine how baffled he must be by the popularity of Marvel films. When it comes to superhero films, when it comes to PG-13 remakes of your favourite R-rated action movies, when it comes to uninspired and lazy politically correct reboots, there are loads of issues and problems, but when you look at the cause, it always comes down to the same thing: money, and therefore greed. Why make 8 $25 million risky artistic films, some of which might be a hit and some which might flop, when you can make one $200 million superhero movie and make $1 billion from it, and then squeeze a couple of sequels to boot? When money is your primary objective, it's a no-brainer. Interestingly, as I was making this video, Scorsese made some new comments about Marvel cinema. He wrote in the New York Times the following: "Many franchise films are made by people of considerable talent and artistry. You can see it on the screen. The fact that the films themselves don't interest me is a matter of personal taste and temperament. I know that if I were younger, if I'd come of age at a later date, I might have been excited by these pictures and maybe even wanted to make one myself. For me, for the filmmakers I came to love and respect, for my friends who started making movies around the same time that I did, cinema was about revelation, aesthetic, emotional and spiritual revelation. It was about character, the complexity of people and their contradictory and sometimes paradoxical natures, the way they can hurt one another and love one another and suddenly come face to face with themselves. It was about confronting the unexpected on the screen, and in the life it dramatized and interpreted, and enlarging the sense of what was possible in the art form. Many of the elements that define cinema as I know it are there in Marvel Pictures. What's not there is revelation, mystery or genuine emotional danger. Nothing is at risk. The pictures are made to satisfy a specific set of demands, and they are designed as variations on a finite number of themes. They are sequels in name, but they are remakes in spirit. But the most ominous change has happened stealthily and under the cover of night. The gradual but steady elimination of risk. Many films today are perfect products manufactured for immediate consumption. Many of them are well made by teams of talented individuals. All the same, they lack something essential to cinema: the unifying vision of an individual artist. He also explains why he passed on Todd Phillips' Joker movie, a film heavily inspired by Scorsese's own Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy. "I know the film very well," he said, speaking to the BBC. "I know Phillips very well. My producer, Emma Tillinger-Koskov, produced it. I thought about it a lot over the last 4 years and decided I did not have the time for it. It was personal reasons why I didn't get involved. But I know the script very well. It has a real energy, and you're keen. You have remarkable work." For me, ultimately, I don't know if I make the next step into this character developing into a comic book character, you follow? He develops into an abstraction. It doesn't mean it's bad art, it's just not for me. So what do you think about Scorsese's criticism of Marvel? Is he off his rocker? Or is he right and being refreshingly honest? And are these Marvel films all the same? And would you have liked to see him direct the Joker? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.